Much for coming. This webinar is going to be presented by Tara Lepore, who works as an educator and researcher at the Webb Schools at the Elf Museum of Paleontology. My name is Michelle Barboza, and I'm tonight's moderator. I'm a paleontology graduate student here at the Fossil Project. Please know that this webinar is part of a 4-part series that we have in partnership with the Paleontological Society, and it has been facilitated via iDigBio's Adobe Connect platform. The next webinar is going to be on Wednesday, February 22nd with Dr. Brenda Hunda, the curator of invertebrate paleontology at the Cincinnati Museum Center in Ohio. You can learn more about our Women in Paleontology webinar series and the Fossil Project in general at www.myfossil.org. And we invite everyone here, if you haven't already, to sign up and participate in the MyFossil community. Before we get started, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. This webinar should end no later than 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and the way we intend for this to work is that Tara is going to speak for about 30 minutes, after which we're going to open up the forum for discussion and questions. So we encourage you to take notes and type your questions in the chat box in order to facilitate the question and answer session after the presentation. No one except for the presenter and myself have active microphones, so if you can hear us and you can see the PowerPoint, then you're good to go. If you're having trouble, try exiting the program and re-entering on Adobe Connect, or you can type in the chat box and our tech support team will be helping you. Also, don't forget to take the short survey after the webinar ends. It's really important for us for reporting purposes to our funding agency, the National Science Foundation, so we really appreciate your time in taking the survey. As I mentioned before, you can type questions and comments in the chat box at any time during the webinar, but know that the speaker won't address your questions until the question and answer session after her presentation. The webinar is being recorded, and both the recording and Tara's presentation are going to be available under the resource section at myfossil.org. And lastly, in case you didn't already know, by attending or watching recordings of all 4 webinars, you can receive a certificate of completion. In order to earn the certificate, or for any educators interested in earning official CEU units, you must be signed in with your full name, remain and participate for the entire hour, and become a member of the MyFossil community at myfossil.org. If you have any questions about the certificate or earning CEUs, please contact the project coordinator, Eleanor Gardner. And with that, let's turn it over to Tara. We can hear you now. Thanks, Tara.
Awesome. Great. Well, hi, everybody. I want to thank you all very much for attending. And yeah, we've got a great series of topics to talk about here. I also want to definitely thank the crew at MyFossil. I want to thank Michelle and Lisa and Eleanor, Bruce, Victor, and the whole team for inviting me to be on this amazingly wonderful Women in Paleontology series. It's great to kick it off. So let's get started. As Michelle said, my name's Tara Lepore, and this slide kind of goes through just an outline of what I'm going to be talking about with you guys. And again, if you have questions, please feel free to ask them. I'll be happy to answer them to the best of my ability during our Q&A session at the end. So we're going to go through a purpose of why we're here, a little bit about the history of women in paleo, not a lot, just to kind of touch on why this webinar series I think is so critical. We're going to talk a bit about why paleontology, where did I come into the field, and what kinds of jobs have I had. And I hope in telling a little bit about where I've come from that I can help other students or parents or young people who are interested in paleontology, even graduate students, all levels, to find some sense of, well, there isn't one direct path into becoming a paleontologist. And importantly, I want to talk about how do you guys, any of you who are listening, how do you find your path? Or if you're on a path, how do you pivot? And then we'll have Q&A. And I would also highly encourage you guys to take the survey if you could at the end. I know that would be very helpful. Okay, so moving on here. So why women in paleontology? Why is this such an important thing to have a webinar on? Well, it's been a very diverse arena. or at least it's been the history of women in paleontology has been women have been a presence in the field since pretty much since its inception and even before so. The three women I have here, they're all Marys. That's maybe a coincidence. Mary Anning is on the left-hand side, and she is the British paleontologist who is famous for the She Sells Seashells by the Seashore poem, very influential in the early days of paleontology in the 1800s. And in the middle picture, this is Mary Lyell, and on the right-hand side, Mary Mantell. So these are all historical women in paleontology who often had to, in their day, work under the name or the appearance of their husband's scientific work, rather than being directly recognized for their own scientific rigor and quality. So it's from a very long line of history, historical women in paleontology, that women today are able to be involved in this field, and diversity has only grown, of course, since then. So since the days of Mary Anning, since the early days of the sort of burgeoning interest of paleontology, women have been a part of the paleontology crowd. And why we're doing this, it's really key to me that visibility of women today in paleontology is really important, because the more visibility we have, the more we can be present as mentors for young students and up-and-coming undergraduate and grad students. It's really key to supporting women and female-identifying people from all sorts of diverse backgrounds. So it's great that, number one, we have visibility of women, we can mentor women or female-identifying people, and that we can help people recognize, hey, you know, I can see myself in this field because I'm represented in this field. So I think that's really important. A few recent inspirations also led me to want to talk about women in paleontology, and they're part of the reason why I'm just so grateful to be able to talk today to you guys. There was a meeting called PaleoFest in Rockford, Illinois at the Burpee Museum of Natural History, and that PaleoFest, which I know some of our attendees attended, PaleoFest happens every year at the Burpee Museum, and this past year it was focused on women in paleontology, and that was really an eye-opener, I think, for a lot of attendees, myself among them, and for participants, to really galvanize this continuing conversation of how do we increase visibility and represent ourselves as women in paleontology. And of course, also there was the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology, SVP, Women in Science Social, also coordinated by some of our attendees, and it was great to be involved with that. And it was just really very motivating to see not just one event, but more than one event of women, not just having a meeting of women, but having a sort of kickoff to inspiring other women and talking about the history of women in paleontology. And of course, I've been inspired and been fortunate to have been inspired by a long line of mentors, both academic and personal. I have to give a shout out to my parents here. They were very, very supportive and continue to be. And also my academic mentors, whom I'll discuss in just a moment. So I actually come from training with two women in paleontology, and it's not to say that men in paleontology can't be wonderful mentors, but it's been really great to see and to kind of be taken under the wing of two influential women in my academic life. And so here's a cute little picture of me on the right of me graduating from UMass Amherst, and next to me is Marjorie Coombs. And Professor Coombs is very well known for researching calicotheres, a really cool group of mammals with these weird kind of claw-like hooves. And I worked with dinosaur tracks with her, worked on dinosaur tracks, so it was really great to have her as an inspiratory person in my life. And then I went on to graduate school and did my master's degree with Karen Chin, who is well known for studying fossil droppings or poop. and those are scientifically known as coprolites, and we'll definitely talk more about those. Okay, so why paleontology? Just a little bit more about myself. Just why did I get into this field? And I think many of us who go into paleontology go into it with some kind of passion for the natural world. Many of us start off with this curiosity about the natural world, and the same was true for me. And in the 4th grade, I wrote a letter to John Ostrom, he was a very famous paleontologist, and he was one of the figures behind what's called the dinosaur renaissance, really kind of revolutionizing the way that we thought about dinosaurs from being slow and sluggish to, in the 1960s and 1970s, really being these dynamic and quick-moving and potentially warm-blooded creatures. And he wrote back to me, and that was really, really great, very kind of him to do so, and to me it was inspirational because it brought scientists down from this pedestal, and it made me think, wow, if I, as this fourth grader, this 9-year-old kid, can write to this person I've read about in my dinosaur books, and he takes the time to write back to me, these are real people. And it was just a wonderful experience to be able to get in touch with somebody who, to me, was a scientific kind of idol. I also had a strong interest in biology, geology, and I will say, as we go along throughout this talk, there are 2 main forks in which people tend to go into paleontology, either through a biology major or geology major. However, there are many other different ways that people can go back into paleontology or come at it from a different angle. I will say that finding your own support and mentors, your own supports and mentors in your personal and professional life is really, really important. And don't let roadblocks hold you up. So, for example, if you say to yourself, I may have test anxiety about certain tests, certain standardized tests, the SAT, GRE, or if you have issues with math or different things that you feel like they're hanging you up, I suggest changing your mindset about those particular obstacles, and don't think of them so much as obstacles as things that you can move through, and your passion will take you far. Okay, can we all hear me okay? Still doing all right? Okay. All right, great. So I just wanted to put this slide up to give you a sense of where I've come from and the various different things that I've done. So the title of this slide is All in Good Time, and I mean that because there isn't necessarily one set path that one needs to go through to become a paleontologist or to be involved in paleontology. So I just put in here from 1984 to basically forever, I've had an interest in vertebrate paleontology and paleontology in general. And then I wanted to highlight a few things on here. You can see I have lots of internship opportunities. I had an internship opportunity with Earthwatch in high school, and I will say to any of you who are in high school or who work with high schoolers or who are going to be going into high school to think about opportunities in middle and high school for you to branch out of your comfort zone and to try a field opportunity if at all possible, because this Earthwatch experience was really life-changing for me, and I was able to apply for a student scholarship to get that. So even if you think it might not be within your means, this is a really key thing, this Earthwatch internship, and I'll talk about that as well later on. I studied biology for my undergrad degree. I did a few internships after undergrad. Then I worked for 3 years in the pharmaceutical industry. So I wanted to put that in there to help folks realize that, you can step away and you can be a volunteer, and you can maybe you have to make money, you have to set aside some time away from school, and that's totally okay because these things will happen all in good time. I did eventually go back and I did my master's, and I want to give a shout out to the Museum and Field Studies program at the University of Colorado at Boulder, because I went through a lot of back and forth over what kind of program I wanted to do for my master's, and thought about a master's in certain subjects like biology or geology and had the option to go and do those. But for me, it ended up being this Museum and Field Studies program that was a good fit for me personally. So if you have questions about that program, I'd be happy to answer them at a later time. when we do our Q&A. Again, internships, and then I do want to touch on teaching, and we're going to talk quite a bit about teaching in my presentation. Paleontological consulting, and I currently teach at the Webb Schools in Claremont, California. I teach environmental science, and I'm a research associate at the Raymond M. Elf Museum of Paleontology, which is associated with, it's on that private campus. Yes, go Elf Museum! And I currently also conduct research with the Dinosaur Journey, part of the Museums of Western Colorado. Okay. So congratulations, guys. That was basically my resume. I don't need a job, but there it is. I wanted to put this slide up just to show you guys the power of volunteering and internships. Really, they can be in areas that you may not have thought of before. So the Ecotarium on here is a museum that I had no idea existed until I happened to look for internships specifically in natural history museums. Oh. So basically, just think about places that might be a little bit further away, a little bit more of a commute. Maybe they might not pay you, but they're still really great opportunities to network. I can't emphasize these enough. But if you can, do try to seek out local opportunities. And one type of opportunity that's close to my heart is the GeoCore program, and they are opportunities run through the Geological Society of America, and I particularly enjoyed my experience at Fossil Butte National Monument, where this was a paid opportunity, a paid internship, and if you're not familiar with GeoCore, you can go to geosociety.org/GeoCore. It looks like GeoCorps, but it's GeoCore, and it's a great, as it says here, gateway into research. You can meet potential advisors and have recommendation letter writers. For me, this was really important because it was another step in my realizing that I love teaching people, and I was able to teach people outside in the field. So yeah, it sounds like we've got some more paleo internships being posted soon, which is great. Let's see. These are some pictures of me, and I threw them in here just to give you guys a sense of the various kinds of things you can do in volunteering and internships. This is my sister in the upper left-hand side. This strange-looking contraption is it's actually a calculator that I helped design for an exhibit at the Ecotarium, which is a museum in Worcester, Massachusetts. And so this internship was all about designing an exhibit on dinosaur tracks and being able to allow visitors to the exhibit to interact with the dinosaur tracks directly and to measure how fast the dinosaurs were going with this cool little thing. Yeah, and I see somebody recognizes the Mammoth site. I also had an internship there, and that's me in the blue sweatshirt. And the Mammoth site in Hot Springs, South Dakota Museum is fantastic. Had a great opportunity, a great experience there. This picture of me in a blue hat looking at some actually shark teeth. This is with the Houston Museum of Natural History, or Natural Science, excuse me. And then there's another GeoCore picture here. And I loved working with GeoCore because it was great to help students. I'm working with a young lady here to actually pry up some of these fossil fish from the Eocene Green River and help them really collect scientific data. So that's a wonderful opportunity. So I encourage you all to look as many places as you can for field opportunities and for opportunities to branch out and volunteer and maybe get an internship. Okay, whoops. Independent reading is really important. I just want to make sure I didn't skip a slide. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so independent reading, definitely, if you feel like you're not able to go out and volunteer, make sure you check out resources at your local library. I don't know if people do that anymore, but really crack a book, go to a library, check online, and talk to your teachers, talk to your local museums, and maybe your science teachers or professors, and make sure that you're doing some reading on your own. Try to become acquainted with research papers in your area of interest, or maybe not research papers just yet. Maybe if you want to look at magazine articles or books that are in your area of interest, and eventually start to dabble in things like research papers. And these hashtags are motivational for folks who are trying to read a paper article, a journal article, a research article every day. So let's see. Okay, my undergrad research. So here's a little picture of me at SVP in 2007. Oh, it's little me. And oh yeah, that is a great point too, to check with local fossil clubs. Yeah, thank you, Don. That's a really good point. Local fossil clubs, local gem and mineral clubs. So for my undergraduate research, I mapped and identified and was working on the conservation of some very, very badly weathered tracks on a public site that is in western Massachusetts next to the Connecticut River in Holyoke, Massachusetts. And the really cool thing is, you guys remember that letter I mentioned I wrote to John Ostrom when I was in the 4th grade? Well, he wrote an influential paper at this site in 1972. It was published, and it was all about how some of these big tracks, the biggest carnivorous animals that were moving, they all appeared to be moving in one direction, which he thought could be an indicator of gregariousness or moving in packs. So it was really nice to be able to work on mapping the rest of the tracks at this site, and to kind of be following in the footsteps of somebody that I wrote to. So you never know what connections you'll make and where they'll end up, where you'll end up. You could be following literally in the footsteps, in the footprints of dinosaurs. So get in contact with people. Do so in a way that's, reaching out to folks. Usually we're pretty receptive to students who are interested in paleontology. Okay. I see some questions. I'll definitely make sure to get to those in our Q&A. Okay, so who wants to talk about dinosaur poop? Because that's pretty much what my graduate research was on. The formal fancy title, okay, Olivia does, that's awesome, was Tissue-Bearing Theropod Coprolites from the Upper Cretaceous. That's the Maastrichtian Laramie Formation of Colorado. And something that's really important in science is to think about what are your questions that you're trying to answer. So I was looking at why were there so many strange impressions and things preserved on these coprolites? What are these impressions? I wanted to answer what kind of animal made these droppings. There were many of them, and they were scattered across a significant area, and there were several deposits of them. So what was going on there? And can we classify what these little inclusions look like? And what did I find from there? I found that they are most likely Tyrannosaurid droppings. There are lots of interesting inclusions, or things that I call morphotypes. So all kinds of strange things. Things that almost look like as if the poop, when it was fresh, things got slapped down on top of it, like leaf impressions and possible seed pod impressions. Really cool stuff. And then implications for taphonomy. Now, taphonomy is the process of what happens to an organism from the time it dies to the time it becomes a fossil, and then ultimately the time that it's exhumed or removed from the earth. And so what could coprolites tell us about taphonomy? What could they tell us about why there are so many wonderful preservation things preserved? Bacterial mats, were they involved? And then, of course, diet. So you may think you know what tyrannosaurs ate. They probably ate meat, but it was really interesting to see what was inside these coprolites. And I can't say too much more about them because the research is still, I haven't published it yet. But if you have questions, I can answer them to the best of my ability. And this picture in the lower right is actually a picture from the coprolites I was looking at. So you can see these long lines running along this bone. There's bone inside these coprolites. So very strange. Okay. Yeah, great questions. Great questions. I'll take them at the end. Again, just a shout out to Park Service and Public Lands, especially if you're looking for opportunities that might not be your traditional professor tenure track path. Park Service and Public Lands generally are a good place to look as long as jobs are available. Okay, so then I really want to talk about a topic that I'm passionate about, and if you haven't considered a career or work in education, it can be an extremely rewarding place to be. And I started off in Texas. I worked with two schools, two high schools, Harmony School of Science and Waltrip Senior High School. And here's a picture of me pointing to a bison, excuse me, not bison, cow bone, a bovine femur that I got from the butcher's shop, and my students are all kind of grossed out by it, but it was awesome, and it was really fun to work with kids. It's a lot of hard work, but it can be one of the most rewarding careers. And then I also worked with students at both of those schools on specimens from the Alf Museum, where I currently work, and this is a scanned Mesohippus skull, an ancient horse, and a student of mine actually took measurements on this digital scanned fossil skull, and took measurements looking at the nasal bones, the nose bones of ancient horses, and the nose bones of some horse skulls that we had, some modern horses. Cool. I also want to really impress how important it is to stay involved in research and some professional societies. These are all examples of professional societies that I've been involved in either as a member, or I've given presentations for them, or I've worked with them. So just keep in mind, if you have questions about what kinds of societies to be involved with, I'm happy to answer those. Of course, the Paleontological Society is on here, and grateful for them for hosting this awesome series. iDigBio is a group for the digitization of different kinds of biological specimens. That's not so much a professional society, but it's definitely a research based group. So lots of really cool ways you can be involved online. Okay, I want to talk about consulting and mitigation before I go back to teaching. I worked for a consulting company, and what that means is I went to construction sites, and especially in Southern California, there are many of these jobs, and they're really, really great if you want to get experience in the field. And so what I did is I went out to different construction sites where people were building homes, or they might have been working next to power lines and they were digging in the ground. And in California, we have certain rules and regulations that say there has to be a paleontologist there when somebody is digging at a construction site, just in case fossils come out of the ground. And if we know that that particular area might have fossils, if the rocks in that area could potentially have fossils. So here's a picture of me in the field, and then sometimes consulting and mitigation has you dress up in really strange and weird stuff for trainings. So on the left-hand side, I'm wearing a hazmat suit just in case I had to go on any kind of site that had hazardous materials. So yeah, that was my Darth Vader day. So if you have any questions about work in consulting and mitigation, especially in California, there are also some jobs in Colorado. I'm happy to answer questions about those. Here's some more pictures of me, just to kind of give another shout out to consulting and mitigation. It's not all field work. Sometimes we do things in the lab. Here I am with a saw trying to cut down some rock matrix from around these different shell fossils that we were trying to get ready for curation. So I really should probably be wearing gloves there. So definitely wear gloves if you're using a saw. So yeah, it just really depends on the day. Every day is a little different in consulting and mitigation, and sometimes you're outside and sometimes you're in a lab. I want to make sure that I also give a shout out to fossil prep labs. Preparation of fossils is another thing that I've done as a volunteer, and I'm happy to answer questions on what it's like to work with cleaning and preparing fossils. Okay, so my current job is at the Webb Schools and the Alf Museum, and here are some wonderful, happy students. Here's Gabe Santos. I think he's in our audience right now, and that's me. I'm in there somewhere, and I really love working at the Alf. We are a high school campus with a museum of paleontology on its campus, very unique, and so I really love working with students. I really love being able to be involved in research, and I teach environmental science, so we can come across the hall, basically across the way from my classroom, and utilize the museum to talk about how environment has changed or how geology works with our museum on campus. And I will just give a shout out that on February 11th, the ALF Museum is hosting a Women in Paleontology special event. So February 11th, if you happen to be in the Southern California area, we would love to have people come by, and we're open to the public. So the museum is. And we are a private school with a Museum of Paleontology on its campus. Really great place to be. Yeah, I love these questions, guys. I do see them, just letting you know. Thank you so much for asking them. And yeah, absolutely keep them coming. So I want to talk about you guys. Okay, enough about me. How do I find my path? How do you find your path? I want you to think carefully about your interests. There are many avenues to paleontology. You might go back and forth into various different careers. As you can see, I've gone through several myself. Think about what do you want to study, what excites you, what are you passionate about, but also keep in mind that those interests could change. They could pivot depending on what you might learn about. Take courses, school, online. Try to take a course outside your comfort zone. So you might end up in a course that you'd never heard of that topic before, but I really encourage you to try that. Yeah, definitely go to your local museums. Many local museums will also have opportunities for you to either volunteer or for you to be involved in their fossil prep lab if they have one. And yeah, talk to people in the field. Talk to me, I'm happy to help. Talk to people you might know locally. Try to find a mentor who can really really help you out. That's what we're here for. Again, just really try to continue to build your new skills, learn new skills, continue to read independently. Can you picture yourself? I found this to be really important when I was a student. Could I picture myself reading and writing academic papers all the time? And you might find some papers are more accessible than others, but really think about that. Is that something that really gets you jazzed about communicating science? I think that's an important thing to be honest with yourself about. Try to be as strong as you can in math, science, and writing and art. Writing and art shouldn't be overlooked. They're really critical pieces to being a good science communicator. But don't be discouraged again if you're set back. And I will say, if I could go back and change anything, I would go back and take more computer programming, because there are certain things that I find myself needing or I find myself wanting to know more about. And computer programming, especially something called R or HTML, Java, things like that, CSS, if you're familiar with that, those can be really helpful if you want to create a website or learn more or communicate more about your science. Field experience. So I really want to emphasize with that experience I had in high school, I knew I liked paleontology and I knew I liked science, but I didn't really know what kind of paleontological career I wanted to find myself in. And it wasn't until I was in high school and could have this field experience and then continue on to have more field experiences that really helped me solidify what I wanted my career in paleontology to look like. I highly recommend that you try your best, and I'm happy to help field any questions about it, to try and find a field experience. And yeah, I had to represent on the left-hand side. This is Comb Ridge in Utah, a very beautiful place where I currently conduct research with some friends of mine. And yeah, here I am again. This is me looking very diligent. I look like I'm taking really detailed notes. I'm sure I am. I hope. So again, just some more pictures of field experience, and the fact that not all fossils are really big. Here I am holding a tiny mammal tooth. So you just never know what kind of field experience you might end up having. Okay, keep your eyes open, keep your options open. I'm glad to hear that we have some artists in the audience, because it's great to develop your artistic skills. And just some more pictures of me in the field. And again, I want this to be a dialogue more about the both of us, like you as a collective audience and me. But the picture on the left-hand side is very special to me, because that is a picture of me in that very first field experience I had in high school. And it was actually an archaeological field experience, so I will encourage you to please think about archaeology. If you want, we can talk about the differences between archaeology and paleontology, but think about field experiences that might be a little tangential, a little different than what you might look for, and you might find them. So that was really a great experience for me. This is with Earthwatch. And I'm working with the Tate Museum in Casper, Colorado. Some great folks there too. Yeah, I wanted to put in, I couldn't go through this whole presentation without putting in pictures of dinosaur bones. This is an Edmontosaurus that the Tate Museum was working on way back in 2005. So it's a little hard to see, but that's definitely a dinosaur in there. Again, volunteering. Okay, I see we have, yep, wrapping up my talk, so I want to make sure we have time for the Q&A. Again, just make sure that you spend some time exploring your favorite subjects, figure out is field work for me, is lab work for me, okay? Internships, again, this is a little bit of a rehash, but try to get as many opportunities as you can. Sometimes they can be paid, which is wonderful. Okay, and try to get them as early as you can, but it's never too late. Research projects, try to undertake a senior thesis in undergrad, cross-register for a class. If your college or university doesn't offer a class, or your high school doesn't offer a class, think about other opportunities that you might be able to undertake. And of course, keep in touch with folks like the people at MyFossil, join MyFossil, talk with your local museum, and keep in touch, of course, with me. I'm happy to help. One of the last things I want to talk about is just starting a blog. So I just wanted to give a shout out to ways in which you can be involved and share your knowledge. So this is just a link to my own blog. You can contact me on social media, join the Paleontology Education group on Facebook. The bottom two are a couple of things that I do as an aside to my regular job duties. So I blog on a place called the Public Library of Science, and then I also run social media for the Paleontological Society. Okay, I definitely want to make sure we have time for Q&A, so please feel free at this point to ask me any questions you have about anything that I do currently, or yeah, let's open it up.
All right, excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
You provided a
No problem.
information and resources for us. So like Tara said, we're going to open it up to everyone for questions and discussion. Again, only Tara and I have microphones right now. We're going to be reading aloud your questions from the chat box. But first, we did keep track of all the questions you were asking throughout the seminar. So first question you got, Tara, was, what should we do for undergraduate research if we don't live near any fossils we are interested in? They say, should we settle and just do anything fossil related? Do you have any suggestions regarding that?
Yeah, that's a really great idea, a really great question, and it is an important thing to talk about. When I was growing up, I lived in the Boston area, and it wasn't until I went to undergrad, about 2 hours away from home, that I was surrounded by fossils that I knew about. Or could study. So it took me some time to actually go and seek out these opportunities and be kind of in the right place at the right time. But that being said, if you're not in the place where you think there might be fossils, I would consider one of two things. If you're dead set on studying one particular group of animals and you can, or organisms in general, and you can move, then I would consider jumping out, and if you can, go to the place where that job might be or where that opportunity might be, especially if it's a paid opportunity. But rather than settling, you can also find resources online. So, for example, there are digital fossils that you can study through the increasing amount of digitized fossil resources. Often they're open access or open to study or for folks to download. You could even 3D print some of these fossils. I think getting in touch with folks who are within your regional area might be a good idea if you feel like you're not close by. And if you're an undergraduate or a high school student or able to do something over the summer, that might be a good compromise. So where you can't do it every day, but you have an opportunity that you go to.
Great.
That helps.
Yeah. So when you were talking about your grad research, someone wanted to know how you knew the coprolites you had were from a T-Rex, and also what exactly are morphotypes?
Yeah, great questions. So morphotypes are basically a word that we use to describe features that consistently look the same across a number of different fossils. And in this case, my morphotypes were, they might have been a leaf impression, for example, and that leaf impression might have been a morphotype or something that I saw consistently across a bunch of different coprolites. Or maybe I saw a seed pod, something that looked like a seed pod, and I might say, oh, this is the seed pod morphotype. So I hope that helps describe what those are. And then how did I know they were tyrannosaurid coprolites? How did I know who dung it, right? Well, I don't know for sure, and I don't know for sure that they were T-Rex, like that specific species, but my conclusions were that they were tyrannosaurid. They were a large meat-eating dinosaur, large carnivorous dinosaur, and the reasons were the coprolites, even though they were broken up, when you put them all together, they were very large. They made up a pretty substantial size, and so we knew it had to be a big animal. We knew it was a meat eater for two reasons. There's bone inside, and there's also what looked like muscle tissue impressions inside, which is really cool. So something that was eating meat. And the coprolites also have something called phosphate. Phosphate is a chemical composition of the coprolite, and so when I chemically tested them, I knew that they had something that is pretty typical for something we see a lot in the coprolites, the poops of meat-eating animals. So the size, I knew it had to be a big animal. I knew it had to be a meat-eating animal. And then where I found them was in a formation where the biggest meat-eating animal we know of that lived on land, where these would have been deposited, was something like a tyrannosaur. So that's a great question.
That was a great answer. Thanks, Tara. So the next question I think you'll have a lot to say about is how can one intern under a fossil prep person? So how can one get involved in fossil prep?
Oh, that's a great question too. Yeah, these are all wonderful questions. So fossil prep, you typically will go through a museum that might have a training program, or you might simply get your feet wet on, after school or on weekends, and you might be working with somebody who will train you in how to use certain tools that are used to clean fossils. I won't go into too much detail just in the interest of time of what those tools are, but they do take a little bit of training, and so I would reach out to a museum that you might have to contact someone because they might not have a publicly viewable fossil prep lab. It might be behind the scenes, and you might have to reach out and contact someone and say, hey, do you prep fossils? For example, at the Houston Museum of Natural Science, where I volunteered, I had no idea they had a fossil prep lab, but they did. And once I volunteered there, I saw where it was, and so I would encourage you to just get in touch with folks and who work in a museum, maybe a collections manager, it might be a curator, it might be an educator outreach person, and they'd be able to forward you to somebody who could connect you with their training program if they have one.
Great. So related to training programs and other opportunities, someone asked if you know of any opportunities open to Canadians or internationally trained paleo students. The person who was asking the question said that they often see internships that are restricted to U.S. residents only.
Okay, great. Yeah. Well, I am based in the United States and I work in the United States. I have friends and colleagues who work in Canada, and I really don't know. It's a great question, but I really don't know. Every job is a little different, and some jobs will be willing to help with a work visa and others might not. And I know that can be sometimes a little bit of a catch-22, but I don't really have a lot of background knowledge or resources on that. But if you have a specific job in mind, you could always contact me, and maybe we could go forward with that.
Cool. So we have a younger audience member here in the webinar today. She's 11 years old, and she wanted to know, since she's interested in paleontology, what can she do now as an 11-year-old to get more involved?
Hey, that's awesome. Is this Olivia or is it who is this? I just want to know, make sure I got your name. Hey, Olivia. Yeah, well, it's great that you're here. Wonderful to meet you, sort of long distance. So, you want to know what you can do to be involved in paleontology as an 11-year-old. So I would say when I was almost your age, I wrote and kind of got in touch with paleontologists, which is exactly what you're doing. That's awesome. You're already on the right track. And if you want to be involved, I'd say I would look for maybe some summer programs or for some after school programs that might be, yeah, like museum programming that might be available to you in your local area, and you might be able to get some hands-on experience. Some museums have even some field projects that you can do as an 11-year-old. Just depends on where you go. You might have to go travel someplace to do that. But yeah, I think it's wonderful that you're so interested now, and keep that interest going, girl. That's awesome. I hope that helps.
Great. So someone also asked, what about if they live in an area that doesn't always have fossils? So New England, for example, can they still get involved in paleontology?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and so I grew up in New England. I grew up in the Boston area, and I don't know if that's where you're based, but I will say that if you're in an area that might not have fossils, first of all, think outside of just maybe dinosaur fossils. There could be lots of invertebrate fossils in the area that you're in. I think a lot of folks have been mentioning gem and mineral or fossil clubs. If you have one in your area, that might be a good place to reach out. But if you're absolutely sure that there are no fossils directly in your neighborhood, um, again, just thinking about summertime opportunities or opportunities where you might be able to travel to work on fossils are a great way to get involved, and you might have to go elsewhere to do it. But I will say in New England, if you go to Western Massachusetts or Connecticut, there are some wonderful resources in paleontology there, and that's just with dinosaur related stuff. Also, New York, upstate New York has quite a few resources. So if you're interested, feel free to get in touch with me. I can speak to some personal experience in the New England area.
Cool, thanks, Tara. So you were talking
Yeah.
about how you've had experience with a lot of different aspects of paleontology, education, working in the national parks, doing research, and someone wanted to know, what do you enjoy doing the most?
Yeah, that's it's a tough question because I've had a bunch of different experiences and they've all been enjoyable in their own ways, but I think probably what I do right now is the most enjoyable. And the reason for that is I love teaching and I love being involved with the next generation of scientists, and I love thinking about the environment and our past and how we can still we can use evidence from the past to inform questions that we ask today about the environment today. I love doing that, and I also really enjoy being able to conduct research um, on a high school campus, which at Webb and the ALF is a little unique, but I really love that I can do both of those things. If I had to pick a close second, I really enjoyed my other teaching experiences. If I had to pick a close second, oh boy, I would probably have to say some of my internships that I've done have been wonderful. Like, for some of the same reasons, only I've been teaching people in the field, and I love going out into the field, which we also do at the ALF Museum and the Webb Schools. But um, I think it's really great to be out in the field and talk with people and show them what you're doing and have them be involved in the process of digging up fossils. Gabe mentioned that we do have a summer program for middle school students that gets people involved in science, and there are other opportunities as well for students to be involved in the field. So I just really want to plug that. If you can get out in the field as much as possible, those can be really wonderful formative experiences.
Thanks, Tara. So that's all the questions that we had that were asked during your talk. If anyone else has any other questions that they want to put out right now, we have a little bit of time left. So last call for questions. Okay. Well, if that's it, then I would just like to go ahead and say thank you, everyone, for attending. And please don't forget to complete the short survey. We do have a link up in the webinar notes. So if you look right above your chat box, you'll see the Women in Paleo Forum link and the webinar survey link. You can click the link directly from the presentation. We've just changed the slide as well. Remember that you're going to also be able to view this recorded webinar if you want to switch back to see all the other slides and see the suggestions that Tara had. You can also continue discussion with Tara in our webinar forum. And don't forget to mark your calendars for February 22nd, which is going to be our next webinar. And with that, I think we'll say goodbye. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone.